Hello and welcome to the Football Hipsters podcast. It's been a while, but it's time for another special. I am your host, Kris, co-founder and podcasting extraordinaire. Well, maybe not, but you can call me what you like. But I have four fantastic guests this evening, as we're going to talk about the thing I love the most, French football. So without further ado, I shall introduce my guests. Ladies first, of course. Lana, good evening. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Are you well?
Well, all things considered, I'm fine.
Good. You got a big game ahead of you at the weekend, which I'm sure we'll touch on later on. But glad to hear you're all right, apart from last night, which we won't discuss, of course.
Thank you.
Not a problem. Introducing next up, a returning guest from previous shows. It's Mr. Rich Allen of French Football Weekly. Evening, Rich.
Good evening.
You're a little bit poorly, aren't you? So we'll just get that one out the way straight away.
I've got the plague.
So it's gone from the flu to the plague in 5 minutes. That's
full-blown plague.
If you need to get to a doctor during the pod, we will understand. Fine. Thank you for coming back on.
My pleasure.
And I've dragged one of your cohorts on for the very first time. Also on French Football Weekly, it's Mr. Jeremy Smith. Evening, Jerris.
Hi, how you doing?
I'm all good. I've followed yourself, Andrew and Rich, for a long time. So thank you very much for joining us tonight. Much appreciated.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Always a pleasure. And last but by no means least, another guest from a medium we've spoke to before. I've spoke to Christian before off of the Get French Football News show, but I've gone one better this time. I've got the regular host of the weekly show. Here's Mr. Nathan Staples. Evening, Nathan.
Evening. I don't know if I'd be one better. That's a nice compliment to take. I'll take that. I don't think Christian will like that one as much.
Oh, you can play it back to just to wind him up. It's fine.
Yeah, I'll take it.
Good stuff. Right. Okay. Well, thank you very much for joining us this evening, gentlemen. Very, very much appreciate it. And ladies, of course. We're going to start the show by just giving our listeners a little bit of a flavour for the reasons why you follow French teams. Because, as I say, three of you, of course, are British. And Lana, of course, you're from all different types of countries and all shapes and sizes. So shall we start with you, Lana? So you are a Lyon fan.
Unfortunately.
Give our listeners a little bit of a reason. Why Lyon? What drew you to support them and follow them over the years?
Well, lately I have no idea why I support them, but I am stuck. But yeah, it started, well, it's more, I think it's a decade ago, since I'm a France fan, it just became normal to me to follow the French clubs, and Lyon was the one that drew me to them because they had Juninho, they had signed Kim Källström, who Rich knows and adores a lot, and they had all this great academy, so it just was so natural for me to start following them, and they were so successful as well, going 7 years, winning the league and doing so well. Not so much recently, but we don't need to, talk about that. But they're the main reason that they're the main club I follow. I follow PSG as well, but that was mostly because of Zlatan. Not so much anymore. But it's I started to follow more clubs this season, Monaco, Nice. So trying to variate and be less disappointed when a certain team loses.
Well, we're not going to mention the losses recently, so don't worry. We'll just skate over those. But that's Lyon out the way. I'm going to go to Jez next because Jez, you follow I think, would it be fair to say, an unfashionable French club? So why don't you tell us who that is and why?
Okay, I support Metz. It's pronounced Metz, not Metz, because they're a bit sensitive about constantly being invaded by Germany. And the reason I support them is actually I'm not entirely British. I'm half French, and my mum is from Metz, so it's kind of my home French team.
That's as good a reason as any. I mean, you can't knock that. Super.
And I think possibly the second match I ever went to was the French Cup semi-final in 1988 at Metz. That was in the days where it was 2 legs, and the atmosphere was better than I think anything I've ever seen in England, and I've basically been hooked since then.
Superb. And I think I'll speak on behalf of myself and many Arsenal fans. Thank you for Mr. Robert Pires. We do appreciate it. So thanks for that. And as regular listeners to the podcast will know,
You're not thanking me for Adebayor.
No, well, maybe for a season, but not anymore. Our regular listeners will know I'm quite partial to a nice kit as well, and I have to say Messers are some of the finest kits in Europe. I think that's a lovely shade. So, thank you. Okay, Nathan, let's go to you next. So I suppose it's almost a two-pronged question for you. What got you into hosting a show about French football, and which team do you follow and why?
I'll go with the team that I follow first, which is none, surprisingly. I'm the red herring in the group of not really actually supporting a French team. I'm the complete neutral, as you should be as a host of a podcast, I think. The only thing I can maybe claim to is I might be the perpetrator of the Nicolas de Préville fan group, if you like. He's a fabulous footballer, but I tend to stay neutral. How I came to host a French football podcast, that's a good story as well. It just fell at my lap, really. I did a lot of writing for GFFN, doing prospect pieces because I love watching young footballers and watching them grow. So that was where it started. And then just followed on from there. They thought about doing a podcast, see if I wanted to host it. And it's gone there ever since. And I've thoroughly enjoyed it. As you might know, it's a good pastime to have as well, isn't it?
Yeah, time-consuming one at times. Like
just a tad.
Yeah, you finish work, come home, and think, "Oh God, podcasts to do," and away you go. So
yeah.
We do 2 shows a week. So yeah, it doesn't have, as of course to yourself. So it doesn't have to cut into your time, but we do it for the love of the game, of course. And we'll finish with Rich. I know who you follow, Rich, but go on, tell our new listeners, who do you follow and why?
For my sins, Ren. I was, still do. I was a Blackpool fan as well. So I'm sort of used to disappointing teams, underachievers, feeling of hopelessness with your football team. So Ren seemed quite a good fit. It sort of really stemmed from since 98, I think it was. Nearly every year, holiday in the Brittany area. Not as frequent now as used to, but from there, sort of in the shops, you pick up newspapers and you're having a look at football scores, and Ren were in the news, and you sort of follow them and you follow the scores, and eventually it grows and grows and grows, and world's most famous Kim K, of course, played for them. I can't think of any other Kim Ks that would be more famous than the great Swedish one, but it all stemmed from there, and probably I would say in the last 7-8 years, it's probably taken on another step and another level, to the point now that when I am asked what football team do you support, my answer is Ren. It's not Blackpool anymore, and sad as that may be, for whatever reason, it's it's a nice little quirk to have, I think.
Well, at least you don't have to deal with the Oyston family if you sort of put Blackpool to the side. So
I don't know. The Pinot family and Ren are trying to do the same, I think.
you don't have to pick them. Well, that's everybody introduced then, and I'm sure every listener to our podcast on a regular basis knows that I'm a Lorient fan. Oh dear. So less said about them, the better. Maybe we'll touch on them later on. I'm feeling sadistic. But we're going to start the show really with just sort of looking at the season so far as a whole, and kind of working our way a little bit down the league before breaking into a little bit of open chat about various things in French football. So we'll start at the top. We've got a kind of a 3-way title race.
4.
I've argued 4. Oh, okay. Fair enough, Lana. If you want to put Lyon in that bracket, that's fine. You go for gold. 3.5 team title race. We saw.
I think she meant Marseille, not Lyon.
Oh, you're poking
Wow.
the bear now, Rich. You're poking the bear. We saw the PSG Monaco game last week, and of course Nice picking up a victory as well. 22 games gone. Jez, I'll start with you. Is this arguably one of the hottest title races in Europe, if not the hottest title race at the moment? Because it's been very entertaining so far this season, is it, between the 3 clubs?
It's definitely up there. I mean, there's Germany, I think, is still relatively close, and but yeah, I think apart from that, especially considering the last few years, it's been a bit of a cakewalk for for PSG. I think it's I genuinely can't say at the moment who's going to win it. I still expect Nice to fall away at some point, but I don't think Monaco will at all. I think Sunday, if any proof was needed, Sunday was as good as you're going to get, and I really think this one is going to go to the wire.
Completely agree with you. Nathan, what do you make of particularly Monaco this season? I mean, they've been, you mentioned earlier on, like you like to follow young footballers coming through, making their way in the game. And they've got just an absolute talent pool of players, but it wasn't always like this, was it? If you think of the Monaco of all the money, sort of pre-divorce of Rybolovlev anyway, they've changed it completely round, and manager Leonardo Jardim has changed his style. Everything has changed, and they're arguably one of the most entertaining teams in Europe. So what have you made of them overall this season?
They've been absolutely fantastic. Yeah, Monaco create a team like I do on Football Manager, which is buy every single young player you can find with a decent bit of ability and mould him into the player you want to be. They've really built on that defensive system that they had over the last 2 years under Jardim and made a wonderful attacking unit that, unfortunately, you probably saw against Lorient a couple of weeks ago, where they just absolutely hound teams for 90 minutes and they just attack in such wonderful ways. I mean, they sometimes have 4 or 5 players in the box against weaker teams where they're just throwing everything at you. And it was clearer the other night when Paris Saint-Germain played almost a defensive game at home that how far they've come. They've scored a ridiculous amount of goals. Falcao's playing semi-decent again. They've got probably the best midfield partnership in European football in Bakayoko, former Rennes player. I'm sure Rich will be pleased to see him doing so well at an opposition team. And Fabinho, who I think is a wonderful footballer as well, possibly one of the most versatile footballers in world football. They have a terrific team, and I still think they're going to win it all. I can't see another team in Ligue 1 that's as good as Monaco. I don't think there's many teams in Europe as entertaining, at least, as Monaco have been this season.
I completely agree, and I've been banging the drum that they're going to dump Man City out of the Champions League. Nobody's listening, but they soon will.
They will.
I am.
Being an Arsenal fan, I'm quite used to English teams undervaluing the ability of French teams, sadly.
Particularly Monaco.
Exactly, yes, exactly Monaco. So I'm completely with you. I have them as my favourites. So, Rich, do you want to make a case for Nice not falling away? Do you have they got the longevity in the season to keep this, let's be honest, amazing season going?
The key for Nice has been that defence, meanest defence in the league. In Dante, they've got one of the signings of the season. He's been an absolute rock at the centre of their defence. They had obviously Claude Puel in charge for a number of years. He's now moved on. They brought in a fresher face, if you like, in Lucien Favre. So new ideas have been developed onto the sort of firm, sound, solid bedrock that Puel had put in place. They've been able to call upon some really good young players. Malang Sarr, alongside Dante, he's probably been one of the revelations of the season. Still so young, but such a huge prospect, and already attracting the interest of some of Europe's biggest clubs. So for them, it's all about the defence. They're not scoring they're playing attractive football. They're not scoring as many as the other two. There is a heavy reliance on Alassane Player up front, who's 11 or 12, I think, is he now?
He's
14.
Is he 14? Oh, there we go. Balotelli, I think, has probably done better than a lot of people thought. I think he came with quite a tarnished reputation. I think in all things considered, he's actually had a pretty low-key season so far. Only 1 or 2 blow-ups that perhaps just rising to the bait of some of the more wilier opponents he's played. So it's difficult to make a case for something I don't believe in, because I do think Nice will fall away. But if they can continue to have that really watertight defence, then they will always have a chance.
Yeah, well said. And Lana, you can have PSG, and you can have a little brief moment to tell me exactly why Lyon are in the title race, because I know you're itching to. But PSG, we've talked about this before. We've said about the Zlatan effect being missing has changed everything about the club, not just on the pitch but off the pitch. They obviously have strengthened in this window with Julian Draxler and Gonzalo Guedes, and Lo Celso, who are actually quite excited, probably more excited about him than the other two in theory. But what do you make of PSG under Unai Emery? Because every time I watch them, they remind me of a car it looks a sports car. It looks beautiful, it looks pretty, but on a cold morning, it struggles to start. What do you make of them?
Well, I agree. We've said it before. They just don't look the same without Zlatan. And they haven't been impressive this year, but what I do admire is the way they managed to grind out the results. And they're 2 points behind Monaco, and I don't know, it just bothers me a lot. I guess that they continue to do well, and Cavani continues to score, although we all know I don't rate him, but, stat padding, I guess, makes you the best striker in France. But I do agree with the whole Nest thing. I think they will fall away, mainly because of experience, and that's why I think Lyon could have a chance of getting top 3 if they don't choke like they did. Adding Draxler was a good addition, but I still think they look really shaky at the back. I know many PSG fans will disagree with me, but I just don't think Thiago Silva is good enough anymore. How he continues to get 7 and 8 ratings in the keep is beyond me, but, bias is always going to be there, I guess. I don't know. They haven't been impressive. The only one I really enjoyed watching this season is Rabiot. I think he stepped up a lot from his early days, and I think he's done really well. There's a reason why so many clubs are after him. I do hope he stays and continue to develop, maybe gets a chance at the national team, but we all know how that works as well. I think they'll probably finish second, hopefully Lyon third. But
no pressure.
Who knows?
Yeah.
No pressure at all.
No pressure at all, you promise. We will, of course, touch on Lyon in depth in a second, but I do just want to get everyone else's thoughts on PSG as well, because naturally some of our listeners who are not really well versed in French football will look at PSG as the big project club, if you will. Rich, what do you make of the Emery project? I mean, has he tried to change too much too soon? Has he tried to do what Laurent Blanc was doing? I mean, he's obviously changed back to that formation that worked for Blanc. Is it just a bit stale? I mean, I can't put my finger on what it is, but sort of intrigued to get your thoughts on why they don't look the same.
I've probably mentioned this before, I think. For my feeling on this, and this is coming as someone who is very much not a PSG fan, so, I can be accused of whatever on this. But from my point of view is Emery was brought in with the clear objective to be successful in Europe. Under Blanc, PSG had got domestic, all the domestic cups completely sewn up, fine, in the bag season after season, but couldn't quite get them over the sort of quarter-final hurdle in the Champions League. So Emery was brought in, and I think he was brought in then to be told, look, domestic stuff, whatever, we'll walk that, no doubt. You've got to get us beyond that quarter-final of the Champions League. And I think what he's done is he's come in and by perhaps letting the focus drop off performances in the league, combined obviously with the fact that so many other teams have improved, it's causing a problem. It is causing a big problem that their focus, that they are constantly seem to be being told, is be successful in Europe. And I think it has got to their heads a little bit. I think several of the bigger name players have really struggled. We've seen that Matuidi is just an absolute shadow of his former self. I mean, he's been playing utterly dreadful recently. But he's not alone. He's not alone. There are others. Lana said, I don't think Thiago Silva's as good as he used to be. They've got goalkeeping problems. I'm a big fan of Areola, but he seems to really struggle with the simplest of shots at the moment. And I'm not convinced with Trapp. There's problems there. There's little bit of problem problems everywhere that Blanc never really suffered from. Everyone, you look at Cavani, so Cavani, okay, so he much maligned over the last few seasons. Yes, okay, he was playing out of position. But he's been now brought in as the central striker to replace Ibrahimovic. The problem that we're facing, and I think a lot of us will face this, is Cavani is not playing well. But you're going to constantly be hit back with, but he scored 20 plus goals in the league. And that's the problem that we're facing. And it's almost PSG in a nutshell, is so much as that they're performing and they're just doing enough, but it could all be so much better.
I was having this debate the other day and about Cavani and saying about, people say, he's got these goals. And I'm saying, but a striker in that team, in an apparent weaker league, he should be arguably scoring another 10, 15 than he already has, which sounds ridiculous, but the amount of chances the man wastes. Jez, let's get your thoughts on the man himself. I mean, where do you sit on the Cavani debate? I've got a bit of a habit of being called out on my podcast because I'm always ribbing him because I just don't rate the guy, and I know he's got lovely hair and he looks very pretty, but
he doesn't really, trust me.
No, well, you would know, in fairness. I'm just not convinced. Jez, what's your sort of thoughts on him as a centre forward for arguably one of Europe's top clubs now?
I feel exactly the same. I think I've mentioned it before on our pod that very early in the season when PSG obviously totally outplayed Metz and should have won by a hatful, and Cavani missed, I think, genuinely like 9 or 10 clear chances. There was an editorial in L'Équipe saying, of course he's going to score 30 goals by the end of the season because he's playing up front for PSG. But the fact is that he needs however many hundred of chances to get, or he will do, to get the 30 goals. And that's fine in the league. But as Rich said, PSG, rightly or wrongly, are going to be really judged on how they do in the Champions League. And I think he's proved the last 2-3 years that I just don't think he cuts it at the very top level.
You saw it against Arsenal. Sorry.
Thanks. It's a dagger to my heart. But how?
But he wasted so many chances.
Exactly. Yeah,
at
that's
the
the thing,
Emirates.
isn't it?
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, he was PSG. I mean, that's I think one of the problems of PSG generally. This year they've done okay in the matches. They've basically been flat track bullies this year. They've done it well in the matches you expect them to, but in all of the big matches so far in Europe, obviously it's relative. It was a group stage, and of course they and Arsenal were going to get through, but they outplayed Arsenal in both matches, and drew both of them, and. Monaco actually don't have a bad record over the years against them, but they haven't beaten Monaco. They had to fight back to draw against. They've lost and drawn against Monaco. They had to fight back to draw against Nice. So that they have struggled, and at risk of annoying Lana, I think Zlatan's problem the last couple of years has been similar to Cavani in Europe. I don't think he's performed in Europe. But his force of personality, I think, a lot of the time did carry PSG through in big matches in Ligue 1. Like you see his record against teams like Marseille and Saint-Etienne, just spectacular records. And also to pick up on what Lana and Rich said, I'm sure they both know, but I feel the same about Thiago Silva. But for me, it's not even just about how he plays. I just, how he's captain, the number of times I think he bottles big matches, both for PSG and Brazil. I just can't believe that. I don't see him as any kind of leader at all, and I think they're really missing Zlatan in that aspect.
Agreed, yeah, and he was the same at Milan actually. He was highly rated, but he went missing in so many big games. It's quite alarming to hear the same thing at PSG.
Can I just add one more thing as well? I mean, obviously Emery has got a great record in Europe, and I did like the very start of the season, like the Trophée des Champions, and then the first couple of weeks, it looked like PSG were going to not only run away with it, but actually do it playing good football for once. And that sort of slowed down. So with Emery, tactically, I like how he tried to change it. And as you said, he's sort of fallen back into the sort of Blanc tactic of sterile possession. But that's another great thing about Monaco. It's not just the young players. I think Jardim has really come into his own in terms of tactical sort of adaptation. I think it was his tactics that beat PSG in the first match, and this weekend as well. He's the one who changed the tactics, a couple of times to firstly to kind of get well on top of PSG, and then when PSG did go ahead, he changed it again and managed to get the deserved draw. And I think, I'm not sure he gets quite enough credit that he deserves. I think quite rightly the players are getting loads of attention, but I think Jardin's been fantastic as well.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. With that. Nathan, just to sort of wrap us up on the PSG talk, if you will, do you think their problem lies in midfield a lot? There was a very good article, I think it was The Guardian, published the other day about Marco Verratti, in that when he doesn't play, there's a real lack of creativity. Thiago Motta is still there, bless him. We touched on Blaise We've we touched on Blaise Matuidi's form. It's not been what it was, and barring Adrien Rabiot, there hasn't been too many high spots. And then you look at Angel Di Maria, who's largely disappointed this season. Ben Arfa, enough said. Is it that midfield area that needs a complete revamp? Even someone like Kushkawiak isn't even getting a game, so I just can't really understand what's going on in their midfield at the moment.
It's a really strange one, isn't it? Because they have so many talented players, and that's why they play in a 4-3-3. Really, is they have a lot of what at least named midfielders that are recognisable. I think at this point, Thiago Motta is essentially a barge pole, or a cone that people run past on a daily basis, because he might as well not be there anymore. Yeah, well, Rich made a great point about Matuidi. He looks absent-minded at the moment, and he doesn't look at all the same player. There's not the same energy. You don't see him all the way around the pitch like you did before. I think personally Rabiot might be the reincarnation of him. I think he's been excellent this season. Lana touched on it, that he's been by far their best player, I think, Rabiot, this season.
And their big game player as well. Yeah,
exactly. He's the one who's been turning up at any opportunity. And Verratti, you pointed out the piece, it was written by our Eric Devine and Adam White for GFFN on The Guardian as well. It really points out how important Verratti is as being the different player in that midfield, because you look at when they play Rabiot and Matuidi, and they're two of the similar kind of players, and especially in that first section of the second half against Monaco at the weekend, you could see that both Rabiot and Matuidi are so determined to get forward and then get back that there's no one sitting and protecting what is the utter uselessness of Thiago Motta, really. And that's what Verratti does, is he sits in that little area there. He doesn't do too much. He will definitely get a yellow card for it at some point, because he's a little bit tenacious, shall we say, is the best way to describe him. But he's a wonderful passer of the ball. He's very creative. He can't really score, but he's such a gifted footballer of making something happen out of nothing that they do have an over-reliance on him. They don't have anyone else like them. But then again, you think, can you get another player like that, is another question entirely. Krakowiak, like you've mentioned, he should really be the replacement for Motta, but he's A, not performed when he's been given the chance, but B, hasn't had an incredible amount of chances either. So that seemed like a strange one. So then you think back to when Jez mentioned about the Trophée des Champions with Ben Arfa in the hole, but that's not worked in games either. They were going to play Pastore in that role with obviously
He'd
him.
Probably get stuck in the hole.
Yeah, at the moment, yes, it would be, yeah. And well, Pastore got that number 10 shirt at the start of the season, Zlatan's former shirt, and you thought, well, that's
disgraceful.
him. Yeah. I couldn't believe it either. You thought he would be the man in that hole, and they play a 4-2-3-1, but he is never fit. He's the Abu Dhabi of PSG at the moment, isn't he? Really, but yeah, it's something they may need to think about what they do when Verratti's not in the team anymore. Whether they change it tactically, whether they try something else. But they were so disappointingly negative against Monaco, and so I couldn't believe a team that desperately needed a win to get in the title race, played so inept and so negatively against a team that they needed to win that game, really. I know they're not completely out of the race. There's a big game next weekend between Nice and Monaco, and that'll be important. They'll hope for a draw there, but it was so frustrating, and it's been the key for them this season. That's the key word, frustrating.
Yeah, well summed up. And just to clarify, you're a big fan of Thiago Motta. I understand that now. That's good. And as for Unai Emery, I don't know about any of you guys, but he looks like the one that didn't get into Reservoir Dogs.
Yes.
There's something about that hair as well. I don't trust it. It's too shiny. It's just something's not right there.
It's too much product.
Yeah, I think you're right. Okay, let's move down to a couple of other teams then of interest. Go on, Lana. You can start us off on Lyon. I'll pick on someone else to have their word on Lyon as well. But it'd be unfair not to give you the first dibs. So, what do you make of the Project OL this season? The changes that have gone about. Fekir kind of coming back to fitness and not quite hitting the heights yet. Memphis Depay. The list is endless. Where are you? How are you feeling about the season ahead of a massive game on Sunday?
First of all, I didn't know we had a project. I thought it was just.
Fair point.
I thought that was a 6-month thing, but with Aulas, he's more busy flirting with Alex Morgan rather than focusing on the men's team. But who can blame him? She's gorgeous. So, but I don't know. I think that where to start? Fekir has been so disappointing this season. I knew getting married would be the worst thing ever for him. Lacazette, it just feels like he doesn't want to be there, but at the same time, he shows up when he wants to. There's so much wrong with the whole team that I really don't know where to start, but I think the biggest issue is the coach and his inability to adapt. I think we saw it yesterday. The fact that Maxwell Cornet got to play the whole game, I didn't even know he was on the pitch. That's how much effect he had on the game. And Valbuena did okay. I think he's actually been really, really good this season, especially in the last couple of months. Ever since I stopped abusing him, he's been doing well, scoring, creating chances. But there's just so much wrong with them. And I think it lies with the coach and their ambition, I guess. I mean, they did, even in the Champions League, there were so many things that could have been avoided. So many silly mistakes, and the Juve game, that was just unluck, and Gigi Buffon being great, I guess. But I don't know. I think I just want the season to be over and just start fresh. But also in the summer, there's so many players being rumored away, Tolisso, Lacazette. So, and Depay coming in, it's a great addition, but yesterday he didn't do anything. It feels like he needs someone like Lacazette to perform, to do well. Like, he's not capable of leading the team on its own, and that's also worrying in case Lacazette do get injured for a long time. So I just hope that this weekend with the derby coming up that they'll win. But, it's typical of Lyon to win, then go on to lose against a crappy team like Lorient, no offense.
Oh,
and
geez.
then go on and, spank Monaco 3-1. They're so bipolar, and it just gives me, my hair is just, all white, and I age way too fast for my age. It's not good. It's not healthy.
Try being I was going to say try being an Arsenal fan, but you've kind of done that as well. So, yeah, I'm kind of with you on that one. I want to ask who should I pick on? Jez. I want to ask your thoughts on. I have a bit of a man crush on Alex Lacazette. I have for a long time, and I don't hide it. In fact, I embrace it. I've been craving him in the English Premier League for a while, as long as it's only Arsenal, because I just can't bear the thought of him being in another team shirt. But do you think this is the summer that he moves on, with so many big-name strikers potentially moving on? I look at Aubameyang at Dortmund, likely to move on. Do you think he's the sort of player that clubs like a Dortmund will look at to replace an Aubameyang type of player, or move on to a big club in Europe?
I think it's time. Yeah, I think it's time for him to move, both for his career and arguably also for Lyon's sake, obviously subject to them replacing him in a good way. Similar to Cavani, he's got a great goal scoring record this year, but as Lana said, I just think he's looked disinterested a lot of the time. I don't think he's always played that well, and I think that the number of penalties that Olas gets helps his stats quite a bit. He's been, I think, a couple of times unlucky. I think there was a couple of seasons ago. He started the season like a train, got an injury, and was a little slower for the rest of the season. I think his stats at the end of that year could have just been off the scale. And the same this year. I think he started the season, literally the first sort of 3-4 matches brilliantly, got injured, and since then, although he's been scoring consistently, mainly from the penalty spot, I don't think he's reached the same heights that he did literally in sort of August time. I still think though that he's got fantastic potential. I still think he can be a really top class striker, but I think it's time for him and for Lyon to move on.
Yeah, I'll pack his suitcases. I'll drive him to Arsenal. It's fine. It's not a problem.
He's not allowed to come to Arsenal. I am so sorry, but the way Arsenal fans treat players, no.
Yeah,
Just
okay.
No.
All right, I see your point. If I can lock all those away, can we have him then, please? Surely
No,
there's
because
gotta be a way around this.
Juve's going to do a double swap. They're going to sign him and Tolisso to replace Mandzukic and Khedira. So we're trying to make Juve French again.
Yeah, well, I'd have Tolisso as well. So, I mean, anyway, I'll take my bias aside. Nathan, Olympique Marseille. Currently 6th in the table as we record this. It would be fair to say that's not the big story right now. Obviously, they've just brought back their boy. Dimitri Payet has come home, as it were. They've added some quality players in this January transfer window, and obviously it's with a view to the long-term project at the Velodrome. Kind of two questions rolled into one. One, do you think this will have a happy ending? And two, what areas do you think they have to strengthen again at the end of the season to become the Marseille that they hope to be again?
God, when will this end in a happy ending for Marseille fans? Maybe never quite.
I hope not.
I don't think they'll ever be satisfied unless they won absolutely everything. I'm not sure. In terms of what they need to still strengthen, you mentioned they had a really good window. I think Morgan Sanson, I think we'll all agree, is a really talented player. It's really good to see him performing at that level that he did at Montpellier at the start of the season again, with a couple of years of the in and out of the squad with injuries and not being fully fit, and him playing to his potential again. That's a really exciting signing. As a Man United fan, I may be a little bit biased towards Patrice Evra, but I think he's a terrific leader. He's got great experience that they really lack in anywhere in that team, and he has that kind of personality as well. You see it across his Instagram page and bits that players
does
really.
Does he have an Instagram page?
Yeah,
unfortunately.
You need to, Jez. You need to see it.
I'm joking. I can't not.
You've never seen it?
Juve used to link his Instagram page all the time and be like, "Oh, we love this man." Ugh.
I'm with Lana. I can't get enough of it, but that again is maybe my bias towards Patrice Evra again. But even little additions like Gregory Sertic was a really nice little one at the end of the window. Although his injury history isn't great over the last couple of seasons, his ability to play at the centre-back position and in that defensive midfield position was a really nice little addition. And the one that angered every single West Ham fan, Dimitri Payet, he's still a sensational footballer. I haven't stopped getting abused for the article I put about him desperately needing to sell, to go to Marseille once his true feelings were shown, and it's never ended. In English football, it's never ended. There was Ray Wilkins on Sky Sports, I think it was yesterday, where he said they pulled him out of a pathetic league. I'll just let that one muster for a moment for everyone.
For goodness sake.
Yeah, I'd already we've already mentioned Paul Merson before as well.
Yes.
I did a nice piece on that one. He's thankfully not replied, but I don't think I'd be able to comprehend his reply anyway, never mind. But it's a great signing for Marseille. It's a statement one, isn't it? I pin it as it's not in the same stratosphere, but there's Zlatan signing for PSG back in the day, where it was a real statement of, we can buy a perceived world-class player, come join our club, come join our project. And it'll be an interesting one come the summer, and it'll be interesting come with Lille as well, possibly having a bit more cash in the pocket as well. But they might go places. It's such a tough one. They've got a good manager, they've got a good solid team, but they need to buy defenders desperately because their defense at times looks abysmal. Even in that 5-1 win against Montpellier, they were indifferent. Is probably the best way to put it at times. So that's where they need to improve in the summer. If they can find a couple more players to bolster that back line, they'll be interesting come next season.
Yeah, nicely put. And it's one of those clubs that I think a lot of people, even who maybe don't follow French football closely, are keeping a little eye on for the rest of the season and the start of next. But almost seamless segue into Lille there, Rich. I'm going to give you the interesting sort of prospect of what could happen at Lille in the summer. There's a lot of talk that Marcel Bielsa is being lined up to potentially come in at Lille. They made a lot of deadline day signings. You of course know Andrew from French Football Weekly, who's a close follower. And what sort of do you think they are? Is it a project that you think is similar to Marseille, I guess? Is it going to have a happy ending? And do they have quite a long way to go before they can be considered title challengers once again, as they were previously?
Oh, I think they've got an extraordinarily long way to go before they get to that level. It's a project, yes. I don't see it in the same vein as Marseille's. I think Marseille's is going to be a lot more foot to the floor, bring those players in. There's an incredibly demanding Velodrome crowd who, if you're not winning games 6-0 week in, week out, you're the worst team this crowd's ever seen. And we know how the Velodrome crowd can really hamper how they perform. Lille, I see it as a different kind of project. I see this as a slow, sort of a slow burner project. I think there's not going to be the wild, huge chunks of money thrown at players. I think there's going to be some sensible sort of non-household name signings. There'll be the odd sort of slightly bigger name signing. El Ghazi, for example, someone like him, he's got a little bit of a reputation. He's come from a good background, a bit more money than they would perhaps normally spend on a transfer. But I think the Lille project is very much get the stability in. Then I don't quite know why they're adding Bielsa to it, because that then throws you in a completely different direction of one season of brilliance, second season of calamity. So it's certainly an interesting project. I don't think it's going to quite be that exciting wow project that we've seen with the likes of previously with PSG and Monaco and now Marseille. I think Lille fans will have to keep quite grounded, but I think generally speaking they are. I think this is very much just a case of let's get everything in order. It's a good club. There's a great stadium. There's a great fan base. It's a case of bit of finance to secure the sort of groundwork, I suppose, if you like, of that squad, and we'll build from there. But we're going to build slowly, not extravagantly, which I think seems to be the Lille way. So it's one to keep an eye out on, but it's certainly not going to be a project that's going to get people over here excited.
Yeah, I think one of their signings, actually, Ricardo Kishner, is one I keep a close eye on, because he had big things expected of him in Italy and never really worked out for him. But he's one to keep a close eye on. One thing's for sure, if Bielsa comes in, of course, it will be box office one way or the other. As you say, car crash or high-speed chase, one of the two. Yeah. You just can never be sure. Okay, let's have a look at some of the maybe the unfashionable clubs. I don't know if that's harsh. I don't know. But let's look at Nantes next up. Who shall I go to? Jez, I'll give you Nantes. What have you made of the turnaround under Sergio Conceição? I mean, he's come in. He's done a very, very good job. We had a question actually from one of our listeners, Janzev Shaheen, who's recently started following Nantes just purely because he knew I followed Lorient and he wanted to wind me up. But he asked, should Conceição move to a 4-2-3-1 instead of a 4-4-2? He said Harry looks lost in games and Stupinski is capable of drifting wide. So what do you make of that question, and what do you make of Nantes since the Conceição appointment and era has begun?
I think part of the problem with Nantes is that in sort of was going to say recent history, not even that recent, but not have got such a reputation for playing such brilliant football. The last several few years, it's unfair to judge them by the great teams of the past, but arguably only Saint-Etienne and sometimes Bordeaux rival them for sort of just awful stuff to watch. I think they've got some really good young players. I'm not sure about. I think one of the problems is for a while now, certainly since Djordjevic left, they haven't really had a decent goal scorer. I know Rich and I've had a couple of running arguments with someone who actually rates Salah, but we don't. I do think they've got a core of really good young players coming through, and as you said, I think even though he's young, I would already start building a team around Harit. But they're just, I don't know, there's nothing exciting or sparky about the team, both in terms of just wanting to watch them until some of these youngsters come through, and it feels it's not as bad as Toulouse of the last few years, but there's something about the team. They just seem to be sort of going through the motions. They're generally pretty safe, but not really doing anything to lift their own fans or anyone else off the edge of their seats. Conceição started brilliantly. I just want to see sort of long term how long that lasts. I think a lot of managers get a sort of honeymoon period and a bit of a bounce, and I just have a sneaky feeling that's what's going to happen with Nantes. The last, knocked out of the cup yesterday. The last two matches, PSG and a derby, anything can happen. So maybe it's a bit harsh to expect too much from those two matches. But I just think that it's all going to sort of calm down, and they'll finish in a, maybe top half of the lower half of the table, and no one's going to really notice or pay attention either way.
Just kind of there, almost just residing in the mid-table.
Yeah.
Lana is a club that are very much not in mid-table at the moment, and the alarm bells are ringing for a former champion of France, Montpellier. Frédéric Onst was ousted last week after some interesting comments from the chairman a few weeks previous. He's obviously gone. What has gone wrong at Montpellier? Because they're always a side that, I never sort of found them dull. They were always sort of fairly entertaining. They would ship goals, they'd score goals. They were, just kind of another mid-table side, really. But this season it's gone horribly wrong, and they look like a side that is just sliding down the table without any breaks. So, what in your opinion, on the limited amount you might have seen of Montpellier, has gone wrong this season?
First of all, they sold Morgan Sanson to Marseille. That's what went wrong.
Good point.
That should have been to Lyon, but enough about that. I think Lyon has beaten them like 5-1 in the last 3 matches. They look defensively really bad, and they conceded 5 to Marseille. But I'm convinced that was match fixing, because Marseille was shit in that game. Montpellier weren't that bad, but for some strange reason, Gomez got a hat trick, and so I'm 100% convinced that was match fixing. Because no way Marseille get to score 5 goals and Gomez getting a hat trick. That was just shocking to watch. I was like, I hope Montpellier actually put up a fight. But yeah, I was disappointed a lot. And I enjoyed watching them before when they had Belhanda and Cabela and Giroud to a certain extent, until they sold them to Arsenal. And then I had to suffer through him there. But I don't know. I like them. I do hope they do well, mainly because I like the French teams do well, except Marseille and Saint-Etienne. But defensively, I think they've just been really poor. It just seems like when they concede 2-3 goals, it just like they lay down and basically come and score as many goals as you want. Yeah, there's no fight in them.
I think the loss of Casimir Ninga seems to have hit them as well, because I know he's not an established star, but I was really impressed when he broke out last season, and I thought he looked like a player who could progress into something really, really key for them and get them the goals. And he offered that pace on the break. And since he got injured, it just seems like they just don't have anything going forward.
He scored didn't he score 5 in 2, I think, as well, and then just got injured for another 6 months as well. So he's heartbreak, isn't it?
Yeah, started the season really, really well. And I think he's what nationality is he? I'm going to have to look this up.
Chad.
Chad. That's
I don't know
the
how
one.
you would. Is it Chadinian? I don't know.
We'll go with that.
We'll just go Chad.
Sounds good to me. They have got, I suppose, the one bit of promise this season coming out of Montpellier is Steve Mooney, it seems to be, or Munoz, whichever you prefer to pronounce it. He seems to be the one kind of star, but you know what that means in the summer. He'll probably be gone. So not good. Have any of you heard of any potential replacements beyond? Because they got the former PSG assistant manager that they in charge at the moment. I presume that's not a long-term replacement. Is there any talk from anyone heard of?
Well, they've got him and Printemps, who was at Bastia. And I mean, the first statement said that they were just there to kind of take stock and maybe write a report about what's going wrong. And then there was a press conference that seemed to say they're there for the rest of the season and 2 years. But
wow,
I don't know. Who knows? I think it just depends what side of the bed Nicolas gets up.
Yeah, that's so true. Yeah, those comments recently, that was wow. There's quite a few interesting chairmen in Ligue 1. I think that's fair to say that much. Nathan, let's pick out another club. Toulouse have been mixed this season. At time of recording, 4 straight defeats. They had that absolute miracle final day of the season last year with the last minute goal, sort of staying up and all that went with it. This season it's been a little bit tougher. They brought in a player, I have a bit of a man crush on, Andy Delors, who potentially could get them the goal second half of the season after his horrible trip to Mexico. Sitting in 10th at the moment, is that where they should be, or are they an underperforming side in the league at the moment?
I will forever curse them for that miracle that they did last year, because I'd predicted that, against all common knowledge, that Reims would beat Lyon and then that would keep them up on the final day of the season and make me look like a genius. But thanks, Pascal Duprat, for that one. Never mind. But they were really terrific at the start of the season. They were great at home as well. They beat PSG and Monaco at home. So it's a real feathers under their cap, but they've just fallen off since then. We always thought at the start of the season, losing someone like Wissam Ben Yedder, who's such an important player to them, that they would fall off the horse, especially with a player like Martin Braithwaite, who can be so frustrating, is probably the best way to put him. He's got great pace. He scores a decent amount of goals, but he should be scoring a lot more. He's a budget Cavani almost, but with an extra leg in there. But they've just fallen off the horse. They've got a really interesting team. They've got decent centre-back pairing, I think, in Issa Diop and Julian. It's just Christophe Julien. Yeah, I don't know. I went with then, and I really like the goalkeeper as well. Alban Lafont looks like a really, really talented goalkeeper. He could be really, really good in another couple of years. But I don't know. They've just been missing a bit of something in the last couple of weeks, and maybe Delors might be that. They might need another person up front with Braithwaite, because they've tried Toivonen, and that's worked maybe in 2 games. I think he scored, but he scored about a hat-trick in each of them, which is outstanding in its own strength, because he's been a bit anonymous for the last couple of years. But I don't think they're great in midfield. They have little sparkles here and there in that sort of position, but they just need a little bit extra, I think. I don't think there'll be trouble in the bottom 3. I don't think they'll fall that far. I think they'll finally sort of right the ship eventually. I can't imagine them being there's so many more teams poorer than Toulouse, at least this season, that I don't think they'll be dragged in there. But aiming any higher, probably not with the squad that they've got. I can't imagine them getting any better. Yeah, they're that kind of team that I think 10th is about bang on where they will be come the end of the season as well.
Yeah, and at least staying up, obviously, after what they went through last year, they could probably suck up a season to finish in mid-table, I would guess, after what they went through. But it would be unfair of me to not give our resident guests the chance to talk about their own clubs on this one. So, Rich, over to you.
No, I knew that was coming.
You did, didn't you? We won't mention any game in progress right now, so we can just pretend that isn't happening.
I don't know what you're on about.
Exactly. If it didn't happen, you didn't see it. It didn't happen. It's fine. What's your thoughts on Rennes this season? Mixed, would it be fair to say? And currently in 9th place in the league.
It's been half a season of two halves, if that makes sense. We had a pretty decent start to the season. There were a couple of worrying losses. It wouldn't be Rennes if there weren't a couple of worrying losses. But then sort of, I suppose, end of November hit and it sort of started to crumble away, really. We're coming off the back of a pretty awful transfer window now. Number of high-profile players have left. A number of very low-profile, low-demand players have been brought in. Perhaps to focus on the good stuff. I perhaps don't do that enough. They brought through the ranks two really, really exciting young players in centre-back Yoris Gnagnon, and then a winger, come striker, come does whatever he wants. Kid called Adama Diakabi. Both of whom come up through the youth system. Have made some real talent contribution. I think Gnagnon, along with Malang Sarr of Nice, has been probably they've been the two breakout young defenders, I think, of this season so far. Gnagnon will always then be getting the fans on his side by scoring a pretty much last minute equaliser against Nantes at the weekend. So that will endear him even further. Diakabi did likewise actually in a winner against Guingamp. So they've really got the fans behind them. We've got Christian Gourcuff now at the helm. He's been brought back. I think we missed a boat because I think we really should have been pushing to get Gourvenec when we had the opportunity, when he declared that he was going to leave Guingamp. There's big concerns, I think, behind the scenes as to what is the project here. I mean, I hate using that word project, but so many clubs have to use it, sadly, for want of a better word. What's the long-term plan here? We've just had our club president come out only today to say, our project is to develop these young players. We're not interested in signing 29 and 30-year-olds. If they reach that stage and want to move on, fine. That was his reasoning for letting Grzycki move to Hull, and then we bring in 31-year-old Morgan Amalfitano, and we've got all these talented youngsters coming up through the ranks, and we take Kalulu on loan from Lyon.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, no, pleasure is all yours on that one. There's a bit of confusion, I think. There's a real lack of spark now, I think, in that team. Those two young players aside, Ntepa's gone. We obviously lost Dembele in the summer, and Ntep's now gone. Grzycki's now gone. Where's that spark going to come from? And you're really then looking on, Diakabi, who's got, barely 5 games under his belt. You're looking at Gnagnon to marshal a defence that's, it's a bit creaky at times, and there's problems there, and it really doesn't have to be that case. We're a financially secure club. We've got one of France's richest businessmen who owns the club. There just seems to be a lack of investment and a real reliance on, we've got a really good youth academy. We'll just keep bringing those players up, which is fine, but in this day and age, that's sadly not enough anymore. I think Lyon experienced that for a couple of years until a recent perhaps slight change in their policy. They really relied on their youth system and didn't seem to realise that actually, that's not enough. You need to chuck a bit of money at some players. So, as with Rennes, you sort of get built up by a couple of really good performances and then you knock you down by losing 3-0 against Dijon. Or,
Been there.
Lorient needed a win. So, of course, who turns up at the Moustoir? Well, Rennes do. Of course, Lorient get the win. Losing at home to Bastia. Bastia don't win away from home. That's what they do. That's one of the rules that they do. But no, they go and win. Go and win away at Rennes. So it's a case of it's not enough. I think the Rennes fans. There's a lot of Rennes fans. I think now starting to become really, really dissatisfied with the way that the club is run. We've become used to these up and down performances, and more often or not down performances. There's a real now demand that actually, we've seen what's happening at other clubs. Everything is in place at the club that we could have that kind of success. We now need those at the top of the chain to recognise that and give their input. So we'll see what happens. But I'm not holding my breath for anything other than a dull mid-table finish.
Pessimistic.
That was me being positive.
I was going to say I'd hate to hear negative. Go on, Jez. Speak positive about Metz for us then, because I assume
positive. I wish we were Rennes.
There you go. I would assume, judging from that comment alone, then staying in Liga is the goal, I would guess. And do you think signing Diabate, for example? I mean, I was saying he was one of the signings I thought was a really underrated signing, just because I think he'll get goals. Which I know is the obvious statement in the world, but is survival the only goal? And have you been fairly impressed with how the season has gone thus far?
Survival was absolutely always the only goal. Finishing 17th on goal difference would have been fine with us. And the season started okay. There are a couple of flattering results, but the fact was we were getting results. We weren't playing terribly. Erding started really well, but I've always thought that he's the kind of player who has a kind of streak of maybe 6 good matches, and then there's no point in having him anywhere near the club anymore. And he seems to do that in most places. As it happens, that fact's been hidden by the fact that he's got injured. But even before that, I think he'd lost his scoring form. We were having obviously some particularly bad results. The obvious one is the Monaco 7-0. We were the first ones to be slaughtered by them, and kind of with hindsight, it doesn't look as humiliating as it did at the time. And until, not sure, I think October, November time, we looked like, we were going to win some, lose some, and that would probably be enough to stay up. And then we played the derby against Nossi, and since then, everything has just absolutely plummeted. We lost 4-0. Okay, it's embarrassing. It's humiliating. The way that the team just stopped trying in the last 10 minutes was a disgrace. But the way that the club and the fans have imploded since then has been ridiculous. I mean, the fact is, it is only one match. It is only 3 points. Yes, it's we have to put up with Nossi having all the bragging rights at least till the next time we played. But they should have moved on. Already, like during the few days after that, there was a bit of nastiness on social media and everything. And then came the Lyon match, which we started fantastically. We were outplaying Lyon. 20-year-old kid scores probably the best goal he'll ever score. And then a couple of idiots throw a flare at Anthony Lopez, and I'm sure Lana will disagree, but Olas milked the whole situation for all it was worth. And since then, everything's got even worse. The main set of Metz supporters have been banned. I mean, they're probably going to be banned by the LFP anyway, but I think it was particularly stupid of the Metz authorities to kind of jump ahead of them and ban them. It's caused so much bad blood. And I'm not sure we're going to get out of it. I mean, we had a good result against Nice and against Montpellier, and as you said, I think Diabate may well prove to be the saviour, but he needs to get decent service. It does not look good. The only saving grace is that it's so close down there that 3 points, a couple of wins in a row either way could be the difference between a team saving themselves or finishing bottom. But the worry at the moment isn't even, I mean, it sort of follows on from one from the other. It's not that we're playing badly. It's the fact that morale is so low in the club that no one can really see it improving. That's the problem. Personally, obviously, I think if Juve found some fitness, he would save Metz and the world. But it doesn't look like that's going to happen.
No, that's you can but pray. I mean, that's all you can do, which is a rather nice way to finish up. Because Nathan, you've got the short straw, I'm afraid. I couldn't do a podcast about French football and not include Lorient and get somebody else's thoughts on them. Speaking of praying for miracles, I have to confess, after last weekend's defeat to Nancy at home, I have resigned myself. I have decided that I will now be following a Ligue 2 side next season because I don't think Cassoni is the right manager, never did. They seem to have this mentality of will outscore teams and then don't. Not having the plastic pitch is a huge leveler now because teams are rocking up and winning at the Moustoir where they weren't before. And it just really strikes me as a club that is more worried about what they're doing financially off the pitch, how their reputations are, as opposed to what's going on the pitch. And the squad seems to be a different player in the squad every single week. It confuses the hell out of me. What do you make of Lemelot, and are you like me thinking that we'll be seeing him in a different division next season?
It is starting to look worrying, isn't it? Because they like Jez has mentioned, it's very clustered at that bottom. But now Lorient are just slightly cut off from that group on 18 points, and there's about a 4-point gap between them and the next team, and then everyone's ganged up on that 22, 23-point mark. So it can change quite quickly if Lorient rack up a couple of wins, which, like you say, with the amount of goal scoring that they have in that team, or at least attempted goal scoring, they've got two decent strikers when they play at their level, Waris and Mukanjo, although Mukanjo is very much a penalty expert sometimes. But it is looking worrying. I thought at the very start of the season, it was maybe a little bit quick to get rid of Ripoll, but they looked really poor in some games. I mean, I think the first game of the season, in fact, has sort of summarised their entire season, hasn't it? They were 2-0 up. They looked like, that's a good start for Lorient against Caen. And then there's a sending off. It's 2-2 before half time. And it seemed inevitable that Caen will walk away with the 3 points at the end of it. They've just not got enough for me. They look so shaky at the back. It always looks like a team will score against them. You made a good point. The fact they changed from the artificial pitch, that's a real leveler for teams. They're not... I suppose you're not really frightened of a plastic pitch. That's a bit of a strange thing to imagine. A footballer
I know what you mean.
Facing in tier. Oh, no, the 3G pitch. Yeah, the teams are, at least it's not in their mind or playing on, the ball's going to bounce differently or that it's going to be a different kind of game on this kind of pitch. But they just seem to, like you say, Cassoni doesn't seem the greatest manager either. He's at least steadied them since he's come in, but there were so many sexier names. Although there were, Hubert Fournier isn't necessarily a sexier name all of a sudden, but there were so many other people linked to the job, and then all of a sudden, it's Cassoni, and then okay, makes sense. But like you say, they've just not. They don't really have the money to invest, but they got plenty for Guerrero. That seemed to have gone maybe into replacing the pitch more than anything. And they just seem stuck in a place where they feel like the only way they can win games is by going for it, which is commendable in one way. But the fact that other teams are outscoring them when they're scoring 2 goals, 3 goals sometimes it's highly worrying at this stage of the season when there's, like I say, a number of teams in that conglomerate that are around them as well. Yeah. I do fear for them a lot. I think they're down, in all honesty. Sorry, Chris.
No. I've almost accepted it now, and it's something about me in following European teams. I followed Paderborn in Germany for a while, and they've fallen back-to-back relegations down 3 leagues. They have, so it's just maybe.
Can you follow Nantes next season?
Yeah.
Can you follow Marseille, please?
for the right price, I'll follow anyone you like. It's not a problem. But no, I have kind of accepted the inevitable, and I think just for banter, they should employ Jeremy Aliadier as next manager, just for the hell of it, so we can hear him talk in that really weird sort of North London French twanged sort of accent. I don't know what is that accent he's got. It's very strange.
It's almost like the Thomas Hitzelsberger Brummy German accent, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, Ken
he's-
Mulvey as well. Yes.
Wasn't he married to a page 3 lady when he was at Arsenal? I'm sure he was married to a model over here. He was.
To be honest, though, if they do get relegated, they couldn't do a lot worse than put him in charge, give him season in Ligue 2.
Yeah, coming back to the club he loved and all that jazz. So, yeah.
Give me a couple more months. You can have Christian Gorkuf back.
Or you can have Genesio. We'll gladly give them.
We'll take anyone at this stage, to be honest. But yes, I do fear for them. At least they've got a nice kit. See, I'm going back to kits again. Right, okay. So that gives our listeners a little bit of a flavour for teams. Obviously, there's many more teams we could have gone into. Bordeaux, slowly but surely creeping back up the table. St Etienne, boring people to death most weeks, but decided to start scoring goals.
Still dull with it.
three goals away from home last week. I still can't get over that. And then Nancy and Dijon probably overperforming in 13th and 14th, staying up at the moment. And then the fall of Angers and Caen we could have mentioned, but we'd be here all night, so we'll skate over those. So I want to just before we take listener questions, just have a little bit of a round table about the French league as a whole, because it is a league that divides opinion on many ways, shapes and forms. Lana, let's start with you. There is a common consensus that it is the weakest of the 5 big leagues, if you will. Some people even think it's behind the Portuguese league, which I find a bit weird, but still. Why do you think the French league has this perception of being weaker, of being just a physical, dull league? Because they are the cliches that go with it, along with the sort of the tag of being a bit of a feeder league for other teams. What would you sort of put as a defense to say that those statements are not true?
Obviously, people don't watch the French league. It could be said about many leagues, in all fairness, but I don't necessarily think it's a better league, more than, say, the German or the Portuguese one. It's difficult to say why, but what's surprising is when people say, oh, it's just a tin pot league. French teams have a really good record against English teams in the Champions League. For example, Monaco, PSG as well. They've done well against Chelsea. Monaco's beaten Spurs, Arsenal. Hopefully will crush City in the Champions League in a few weeks. So it's just people being stupid or being prem faces, as us Serie A fans like to call them. Basically not being interested in any other league, thinking their league is the best. And it's kind of ironic since most of the clubs, their club legends are, well, French. If you look at Arsenal, Henry, Vieira, look at Chelsea, they had Makalele. And, it goes on, Cantona at Man United. I don't know, people just seem stupid. That's what I'm going to say. I'm not going to say anything else. And as for feeder clubs, I think in the recent years, not many have left. And if they had, they've gone to, big clubs. Say Umtiti, it's hard to say no to the likes of Barcelona. If Barcelona comes calling, you don't say no. And some of these players, they've played and, it's time to move on, to, test the waters at other clubs, moving up to another level. So I wouldn't necessarily say it's a feeder club at all, but, it's each to their own opinion. I don't know. I guess I just disagree a lot with it because I do watch the league a lot and I don't think it's that dull. But, people have different interests, different leagues they watch, and it's just opinions.
True.
Although some would like to say it's facts because certain stats follow up with their so-called facts. But, facts can be decisive, stats, I mean. We've seen it, Cavani, just because he scores a lot doesn't mean he's a world-class striker who should be leading the front line for Barcelona or Madrid. So you have to look at the bigger picture, and I don't think people necessarily do that. They just maybe see one game, and it doesn't live up to the hype. So they just form an opinion based on that one game of a certain team or a player.
Agreed. And I don't know about you, but I've never sat down and watched a page of stats that's ever entertained me personally. So you can prove a lot with stats, and you can also disprove a lot with stats. Jez, what do you sort of make of the the thoughts around Europe of being a bit sniffy towards the French league. Is it just primarily the fact that obviously the young talent coming out, which is something I'll touch on in a second, is the main draw of the league? And is it that the argument that makes it an easy league to swipe out and say, well, all these young players leave France? Is that a fair debate? And where do you sort of stand on the people that are quite as sniffy as they are about the French league?
Well, first of all, I'm interested to know if other countries are as sniffy about it as England, because I don't know. I mean, Lana has probably got a better idea than me, but I always got the impression that Italy, Spain, Germany probably respected it a little bit more, and kind of acknowledge where a lot of these players come from. But in England, I think it's a mixture of things. I think they're so scared of anything challenging this myth that the Premier League is amazing and untouchable. And they want it to be the best at everything. It's never going to be the best at youth development because of the money in it, because everyone's just buying foreign stars. To be completely honest, there's probably a bit of just inherent anti-Frenchness that seems to make England function anyway. But most of it is just almost kind of it's ingratitude and a bit of sort of amnesia. I mean, as you said earlier, for Ray Wilkins to call it a rubbish league. He's associated with Chelsea. As Lana said, Makelele, Drogba, Hazard,
Conte now.
Some of their best players of the last few years, Conte, have come from France. And, probably if you asked any Chelsea fan, they'll say, oh yeah, he was unknown. Drogba was unknown before he came to Chelsea. It's Mourinho who made him what he was, or rubbish like that. It's crazy. And it's not like it's just the last 5-10 years. Most of the 98 team was playing abroad. There's some fantastic players. And I mean, I think the fact is that it's a feeder league because for various reasons, as much as anything, the tax situation in England, players do go abroad because, especially in England, they can offer a hell of a lot more money. But it doesn't mean that it's not a good league. It doesn't mean that it's not good quality. The one thing that you could maybe argue against it is that consistently it has fewer goals per game average than most other places, which I think is possibly something to do with coaching and fear of losing and teams going for a draw rather than risking a defeat to go for a win. But even then, give the defense credit. Half of football is keeping your own goal safe as well as scoring at the other end. So why not give the defense's credit for keeping the goals down rather than just criticizing the league as a whole? I think, as we said earlier, in terms of competition year in, year out, okay, obviously PSG have skewed it the last few years, but before that, I think there were, from memory, maybe 7 years in a row, 7 different champions. You don't get that anywhere else. As we said, at the bottom of the table, apart from Lorient, I think there's maybe 2 or 3 teams, 2 or 3 points separating 13th from 19th. That's irrespective of quality. That's an exciting league. You haven't got that in England. You don't have that in Germany, where you're almost certain Bayern are going to win and Dortmund are going to come second. Okay, this
Not
year.
even Italy. It's
Italy
just started
as well.
this year. Yeah.
Recently, it's so narrow-minded, and almost certainly most of the people who slag it off have probably never seen it, apart from seeing PSG play Chelsea the last couple of years and Man City last year in the Champions League.
Yeah. That's a great point. I think an absolutely really good point. There's so many. If you said to people, how many people have seen, I don't know, Betis and pick another team, Sevilla maybe. I think most people say, oh yeah, I've seen them. Or you say in Italy, oh, have you seen a Palermo match or an Atalanta game? Oh yeah, I've seen that. But you ask anyone who's seen a Nancy or a Bordeaux or a St Etienne game, and people look at you blankly like they've just invaded from another planet. It's just like, I think you have to watch even the dull sides, quote unquote, to appreciate what those sides do and the league they're in. And as you say, defence is just as entertaining as attack in certain circumstances. So,
Also,
yeah,
as we've said so many times as well, the problem, one of the things that they come back to is, the French teams have only ever won 2 European trophies. But again, another reason is because teams that do well to qualify for Europe are usually ripped apart in the summer. So it's a completely different team representing them. The last couple of years it's changed slightly. There's a little bit more money coming in. The French league is a bit more attractive. There's 2 teams that are attracting players because they can offer wages that rival some of the others. And suddenly we're doing a little bit better in Europe as well, I think. And if that carries on, then there's no reason why we can't keep competing year in, year out.
Yeah, agreed. Well said. And that, again, it's like we wrote this because, Rich, that was my very next question. Does a French side have to win the Champions League to be considered a big, a big league again, to be considered taken seriously, shall we say? Is that the thing that's missing, not having a European Cup winner in recent seasons?
To a degree, yes. But, how many people do we see? And I think it is primarily Premier League fans. How many Premier League fans do we see who still say, the Bundesliga is not a great league. So, it's a one-team league. Bayern Munich walk it every year, blah, 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 blah. Not a great league. Well, Bundesliga's a brilliant league. It's the most supported league. It's probably the most financially sound league. What makes this league's better? It's all very subjective. I'm sure we could argue. If you want entertaining attacking football, Ligue 1 is not necessarily going to be the place where you're going to get it week in, week out in every single game. If you want organised, defensively strong football, great, Ligue 1's your place. If you want the world's greatest players, well, you've got to go to a league where the money can afford that, and that's not Ligue 1 at the moment. I think we're starting to move towards that, but that's not Ligue 1 at the moment. If you want a league that's producing some of the world's best young players, bang, come to Ligue 1. We've got hundreds of them. So I think it's what do people want when they say it's not a great league? What are they actually judging that on? Because at the minute, you want entertaining football. You find me a team that's producing as entertaining a football as Monaco. Because I don't think you'd find anybody. I don't think, even the likes of Barcelona, I don't think are producing the level of excitement performance-wise. Yeah, maybe better, and they've got those ultimate world-class players, but the entertaining football, that's happening at Monaco. For me, it gets a hard press because it doesn't have that money. Because people in the Premier League fans know that their club can just come along and say, "Here's a blank check. We're going to take your best players," and all of a sudden it's these players want away of France because it's a dreadful league. Well, no, it's not. It's because even Premier League's starting to find out now with China. If you've got a club that's willing to come along to any player, I don't care who they are, I don't care what their history is with that club. If you've got another club coming along saying, here's a blank check, come and join us for, 700 grand a week, that player's off. That player's dropped his shirt, 2 fingers up to the fans, I'm out of here. I'm off next plane to Shanghai or whatever. And I think that's what's starting to rustle those Premier League fans, is that all of a sudden these newer leagues are coming in with a bit of money behind them now. And that's what's, I think, irked so many West Ham fans. It's not necessarily that Payet has gone off the back of just signing a new contract and this loyalty bonus. It's because it's Marseille. And they can't accept the fact that all of a sudden there's a team in this quote-unquote farmers league that's suddenly coming in and can offer a player, he's taken a pay cut, but can come in and write the check that the club want to take their best player away from them. And I think we're going to see that more and more and more now, as foreign money now seems to be coming in on a semi-regular basis to Ligue 1. you only even have to look at down in League 2. You've got Auxerre, who are sort of struggling lower mid-table. They've got Chinese money behind them now. Nice have got investment. Monaco and Paris Saint-Germain have obviously got the investment. Lille and Marseille have recently got a cash injection. I think we're going to start seeing more and more clubs in France along those lines. And I think when people say it's not a good league, I think what they're actually saying is they're not spending the big money. I think that's ultimately what it's coming down to. You see the Premier League with some horrific finances and numbers being thrown around. The same with Spain. I think the same is starting to get the case with Germany as well. I think that's what a lot of people are judging it on, is are you bringing in those big money signings, those signings that are going to be in the papers across Europe, not just in France. So for me, I think that there is a feeling that I think that there's a period of change with Liga, and we're going away from this. Obviously it did start with PSG. We're moving away from this sort of everyone's quite equal to all of a sudden we're going to start to see 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 teams break away, but more money coming in then into the lower. And I think we're going to start to see eventually, I think over the next 5 years, a more competitive league, because I'm not a fan of all the money coming in, but I'd much rather have 20 teams who are freely spending money and giving us a league that's a bit more unpredictable than we've seen over the last 4 or 5 seasons. So for me, it's the money, and we're starting to see that change. And for me, a signing like Payet, if we go back to how we almost started on the transfer front, a signing like Payet. I don't agree with it. I don't think it was a player that Marseille needed, but my God, did I love the fact that they bought him off West Ham for that money and riled up so many Premier League fans. More of that, please.
Yeah,
Please.
some of the West Ham fans' fallout last night I was reading was bordering on hilarious. Speaking of sort of the younger talent, Nathan, is where I want to finish this little debate. Rich touched on it there. Liga has the reputation, and rightly so, as producing some of, if not the best young players in Europe, I think. And that there are so many young players coming through at different clubs of all different shapes and sizes, all different levels. What is it that you think makes Ligue 1 produce so many good young players that are sold for huge fees and go on to become superstar footballers?
Well, there's a number of factors in that, really. A lot of the clubs have great academies and great youth coaching there that really sets them up in a great way to start off with. That can't be underestimated. The fact that players get so much time with great coaches at a young age really benefits them early on. And then the obvious that we've mentioned there, because there's not as much money in the game, because teams have had to rely on their youth systems and bringing in players, even bigger teams like Lyon and Rennes, they get a chance earlier on to show what they can do. And I mean, the perfect example of that is Ousmane Dembele last season, and Rich would have probably enjoyed it just as much as I did, of watching him progress. I watched that first game he played against Bordeaux in his debut. He was really good in that, and it just spiraled from there, and it's so wonderful to watch. You forget that sometimes when you watch Premier League football, or even sometimes Bundesliga football or La Liga. Watching a young player blossom, there's not much. I don't think there's a better thing in football. I think to Marcus Rashford last season as well, when he came through, that was the most excited I've been as a Man United fan in a long, long time, because it doesn't happen anymore in England, and it happens all the time in France, and that's because they are given opportunities. If you're good enough, you're playing, and that happens all the time. I do the prospect pieces for GFFN, and I've got an entire list of teams and young players and teams that I just keep an eye on each time. And there's one or two in every single club almost. It's absolutely insane of how many interesting young players there is in France, and there always seems to be another coming through the door, like Malang Sarr this season, like Nagnon as well. There's Maxime Lopez at Marseille coming through as well. All of a sudden, they spring out of nowhere sometimes, and that's the really great thing when you see a player without his name on the back of the shirt in those 30s columns with the numbers as well. You know he's one of those young players, not on a full-time contract yet. Let's see what this kid can do, and it's they've just really benefited from it. And my hope is, Rich touched on the money coming in and the teams with being able to have that spending money to keep some of these young players in this league and let them blossom, and watch how good this league could really be from that angle of not just buying good players, but keeping the young players. It'd be so good to see. Imagine if Dembele was still at Rennes now. Can you? I don't want to give Rich heart an attack, but imagining a player of that quality still at a club now. Imagining that Anthony Martial was still at Monaco. I love him at Manchester United, but at the same time, I was so annoyed he went because I had him as my top scorer for the season, and he went within a couple of weeks. But it happens all the time, and it's what I really get an enjoyment from Ligue 1, and I think a load of people do. Every time I watch a game, there's someone new, there's someone that's impressive, there's someone that's showing for the first time how good they are, and they're just so good at it. It happens every single week. There's someone new. There's not a league like it, other than some may argue Eredivisie is a similar style, although it's not quite as consistent throughout the league as it is in Liga. It's my favourite thing about it. I love watching how many great young players come through the system, and it's a testament to the way that clubs are set up in France, at least to make them come through.
Well said. Passionate and very, very good points made. I think it's part of the reason why I got so into it. I must admit, just watching young players, young teams, and just really finding players to track, and like you say, following the progress of a youngster that you see a player for the first time and you go, I'm going to keep an eye on this player, and to see them grow over the period of games that they play is really fantastic. And
when you find that magical one as well, like Dembele was, where you watch him for the first game and you go, I think this kid's got something, and then you slowly see him grow into it. It's the best feeling.
Yeah, that's me with Tolisso.
It's me with Rashford.
the less said about you and Tolisso, Lana, the better. This is a family show. I couldn't agree more. What we'll do then to wrap up this show is we'll take a couple of listener questions. We've got quite a few, so we'll try and keep our answers short and sweet if we can. I'll try and distribute them around you as best I can. So we'll start with one for we'll give this one to Lana, seeing as it was addressed to you in the first place, Lana. Arjun Pradeep. He says, how highly do you rate Monaco's Fabinho? It's strange that no top team has signed him yet. Funny enough, after what we just discussed. What do you make of Fabinho at Monaco?
Oh, I adore him. I love him. I think he's a very underrated player. Again, because not a lot of people watch Monaco, so they don't know just how good they are, collectively, defensively, midfield and everything. And I think he doesn't get enough praise outside France. So I'm really excited for people to see just how good he is, especially against City, against, their midfield, how it just, again, depends on how they set up. But I think he'll, dominate the midfield as he has all season and just do really well. Hopefully people will, start to respect them. And I think they've been the most entertaining team in Europe this season, both in the league and in the Champions League. They've been so impressive. And he's been one of the standout players for me anyway.
Yeah, couldn't agree more with that. Completely agree. Rich, you can have this one. Jordan Chappell wants to ask, he's, I think it's pretty clear he's an Arsenal fan, because he says, can we make Arsene Wenger buy either Bakayoko or Tolisso, please? No, it seems likely. Yes, I know. It seems likely Tolisso is off to Serie A in the summer, if reports are to be believed. He's off to Juventus. Do you think Tiémoué Bakayoko could be a good fit for an Arsenal or a Premier League side this summer?
He'd be a brilliant fit for any Premier League side. Again, I think I've gone on record of saying this. I'm going to stand by. I would argue he has probably been one of the best players in the league this season. Ironic that it's a defensive midfielder for a team that's scored 65 goals in 22 games, but he's just he had a very difficult time when he first joined Monaco. Couple of seasons ago, he never really settled into the squad, never really seemed to see eye to eye with Jardine. But this season, everything has just clicked. He's been given that responsibility playing alongside Fabinho in the middle of midfield, and he's just been fantastic. He's one of those players, I suppose, a bit like your sort of Vieiras, in so much as you don't really see. You watch a game, you think, oh, somebody's told me Bakayoko's a really good player. I'm going to watch this game, and you watch it, and you think, well, he's done nothing special there. But you take him out of a game, and all of a sudden the game is completely different. It's that ability that he's got to control the game, to niggle away at the opponents. I suppose it's the most recent example, I suppose, is like your N'Golo Kante's. So if I was to put him and arguably say that he's playing better in Ligue 1 at the moment than Kante was when he was in Ligue 1, probably tells you what you would need to know as an Arsenal fan or any Premier League fan of what Bakayoko could offer.
Yeah, good shout. I'd certainly welcome him into our midfield. Well, now, to be honest, but that's a whole different story. Okay, let's have the next one. This is a good one, actually. Jez, you can have this one from Josh, who's one of our regular contributors. He says, with it becoming apparent that Pogba works best with a regista, i.e. a Pirlo or a Carrick, who's the best option to be central midfielder for France? Loaded question, if ever there was one.
I'm not sure who I'd pick out, but there's so many choices that we've been talking about. I think Rabiot can play that role. I think Tolisso can pretty much play every role. I was going to say except goalkeeper. He could probably do that pretty well at the moment as well. Sanson, if he can stay fit, I think could become that kind of player. God, who else is there? It's been so long since France have played.
Thank God.
I suppose you could. Rabiot?
Yeah, I mentioned him. I think.
You did, yes.
Rabiot's a class act. I think obviously he's had his issues with his mum getting in the way, but we sort of right from the start, he just looked like a sort of kind of Jaguar on the pitch, the way he plays, and I love when he's at the top of his form. I love him, and as Lana said earlier, the one thing that it seemed that might be an issue with him is mental strength, like real shyness and kind of hiding behind mummy. But he's stepped up more than pretty much any other PSG players. Yeah,
and last season in the Champions League.
Last year as well. Yeah, definitely. Who else?
Chuck some names in, people.
Is Bakayoko eligible for France?
That's a very good question.
Yes, I think
they're trying. Ivory Coast are pushing to try to.
But he's played for the under-21s, hasn't he?
Yes,
he has, but I don't think that matters. I think even if he played friendlies for the first team, he could still switch.
Yeah,
I'm sure Deschamps is going to give him. I'd be shocked if he wasn't in the next squad. Really.
Really? Would you?
Yeah,
I think Deschamps is turning it around. I think in terms of offering opportunities to those young Ligue 1 based players. I mean, I never saw him calling up Thomas Lemar. Yeah, there were a few injuries, but
that was only pressure. That was solely pressure from.
Well, if he's bowing down to pressure, then that can only be a good thing.
I disagree. I don't think it was pressure. I don't think anyone expected Lemar to be called up. I think it was a very pleasant surprise. But I disagree with Lana in that I've got loads of time for Deschamps. I think generally he makes very good calls. My only real issue with him is Evra.
He's going to take Evra to the World Cup. He said, if you go to Marseille, you will come to Russia with me. So that means I am done with France. Like, I am just done.
I think they'll take him in a non-playing role.
They shouldn't take him at all.
Yeah, I was just they'll put him in his bloody panda suit.
Just on the bench side of
leave
panda
him
suit.
In Russia. Take him and leave him in
singing
Russia.
Martin Gay.
Yeah. It's
Lemar is another who obviously is I think he was kind of picked out as maybe a number 10 and has mostly this year been playing on the wing, but it's just because of the formation Jardim has been playing. But another that I think could play anywhere, and a player.
What about Toussaint?
Toussaint, I think, is more of a defensive midfielder, but I think he's fantastic. And although Gonalons is in good form at the moment, I would have Toussaint ahead of him every week. I think he's a brilliant player. And the other one that we two that we haven't mentioned, although we've mentioned Nice. One's gone off the radar a little bit, and the other one's having a brilliant season. Ciprian Cosiello.
Cosiello, yeah.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about Cosiello.
Yeah,
Oh
he
my
hasn't
God.
played so much recently. He's gorgeous. You could see him they could drop him in the middle of the Barcelona team, and I don't think he'd look out of place at all.
Completely agree. He reminds me. I've got a lot of stick from Arsenal fans when I said this, but he reminds me of a Santi Cazorla type player. Not just the stature, but the use of the ball, the sort of the ability to make spaces when there doesn't seem to be a space.
I thought you meant because he goes completely missing in the winter.
Very good, very good. You're not coming back on again. But, I think he's. I know he's been linked with AC Milan, and I think the only thing that holds Cosiello back at the moment is size. I just think he's the sort of player. I think particularly if you put in the Premier League, I think he'd get kicked off the pitch by a lot of.
He makes Valbuena look like Peter Crouch.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, he's so ickle. But another one to keep a close eye on. So a good question that from Josh. As is this one. Nathan, you can have this one. Max. I always get Max's surname wrong. Sorry, Max. Greichka. I'm going to go with that. He's wants to ask about Pastore. We touched on him earlier on in the pod. In the last few seasons, he said, I remember people talking about him as one of the next big players in the world, i.e. a Maradona comparison. We've had that one a few times. Is it purely his injuries, you think, that's held him back? Because every time he plays, he seems to have an effect on a game, but he doesn't seem to play enough.
It's a bit of a mixture, really. I mean, at the start of his PSG career, he was very average. He didn't really seem to fit in. He didn't really seem to... His work rate wasn't there. His passing that he's shown now wasn't there a bit. So there was a little bit of an adjusting period. He then sort of burst into life all of a sudden and started making really good moves. He's a great passer of the ball. He's got great vision as well. But at this time, yeah, definitely injuries are really, really holding him back because he's barely played this season. He didn't play much of last season either. And that, at his age and that kind of position, can you get back from it? Because his movement is so crucial to the way he plays. I'm not so sure. I don't think he's ever been quite the world beater level that we maybe had anticipated he would have been at Palermo originally. He's shown flashes of it. I think he's below that world-class level. I don't think he'll ever be above that kind of threshold. I don't think he'll ever get further than that. And I'm a bit worried now that injuries have been such an issue with his PSG career as a whole as well, even when he was struggling, that might really be, unfortunately, the story of his career. He's still struggling to get fit at the moment. Every time he seems to get fit, he seems to have a bit of a setback. And that's really frustrating because he is a really good footballer. I really like Pastore. It is frustrating. I can't imagine he'll ever get to that kind of level. And in all honesty, I don't think he ever would have either.
No, you do wonder if he's one of those players that maybe needs a move to sort of refreshen his career a little bit and just start again, maybe.
Yeah, that's the strange one though, because the PSG would probably play him if he was fit. In all honesty, and the form he was in before he got injured was really, really good, and it, like I said, I mentioned earlier that it was almost when he was given that shirt when Unai Emery was given the sort of 4-2-3-1 that he wanted to play with Ben Arfa as well. It seemed like it was tailor-made for Pastore as well to become and blossom into that role, but it's just not happened yet. It might still happen. At this rate, I'm not so certain, but it might. That's the hope, at least.
The number 10 shirt cursed him.
Yeah.
Yeah. Might is a mighty big word, but yes, good question. A couple more, and we'll wrap up the show. Who can I give this one to? Jez, you can have this one. This is a question. It doesn't actually say who it's from. Actually, Lana sent me this one. But can Monaco and Nice keep PSG away from the title, or will experience win out and PSG claim the title in the end?
For the reasons we said earlier, I think Nice will fall away, just because their wins generally are by smaller margins, so it doesn't take a big switch in either form or luck for 1-0 wins to change into 0-0s or draws to change into narrow defeats. But in terms of experience, it can go either way. It's the old Man United thing about winning nothing with kids. It could be that the fact that they've got a lot of these young kids who are playing without fear could help. But on the whole, I don't see it. The fact that Balotelli is pretty much only playing for home matches, either only being on the pitch for home matches or there's no point in having him on the pitch for away matches, I don't think that's going to help. It feels like, just a couple of injuries or suspensions could change everything for them. It was interesting to see that as soon as Seri was back this weekend, they looked back to their best after a pretty poor start to 2017. So it feels like they're still heavily reliant on him keeping good form. But Monaco, I really think they should be able to stay the course. They've got so many players in good form, so many scorers. I think they've got something like 14 different scorers this season. They've got some in Glick, for example. They've got a really solid leader in defence, good solid keeper as well. We've talked about Fabinho and Bakayoko controlling the midfield, and just so many exciting attackers. You've got even players like I'm not sure how to pronounce it, Bosquilla, who I think they're kind of gradually giving more experience so that when a couple of players leave in the summer, he'll be able to become a first teamer. Even he is looking, when he comes into the team, he's looking like he fits right in. Carrillo, I still wouldn't want to rely on him, but he's good for scoring a couple of goals in the last 10 minutes when the opponent's already on the floor. So I think they can stay the course. My only concern with them is that I still think Mendy and Sidibe are much better attackers than fullbacks, and can be attacked, and possibly in a couple of matches, an odd wicket or two from them could lose them crucial points. But then I can see PSG losing points as well. I just don't think they look as mentally strong as the last couple of years. I do think that's mainly because Zlatan's not there and they're in a bit of transition, because I still think on paper they should be walking away with it. But I do think they look vulnerable, and I mean, maybe I'm talking more from the heart than the head, but I really can see Monaco pipping them to the title.
Yeah, I'm with you. And I hope, to be honest, just as a victory for football in itself, I really hope this Monaco side do claim some silverware. Wouldn't it be fun if they won the Champions League? That would be fun, wouldn't it? But maybe that might be a step too far, but you never know.
I do think the other thing, just quickly, just to touch on Monaco, is they really don't have that many more difficult games left. When you look at their running, they've got big games.
They've got
this
Metz
weekend.
at home. Come on.
Well, they finish away at Rennes. So but no, they've got to play Nice at home this weekend. Huge game, 3 points there, and to be honest, the title should be theirs, because then they have a run of games that are all very, very winnable, and you're not really looking to a particularly tough game. Whether you count Saint-Etienne at home, a tough game, Lyon away.
Hey, we beat them.
I'm saying that's as tough as it gets, though. That's as tough as it gets in their running. Every other game, you could say fairly confidently, they're going to get a win. Now, even if they do drop points in that game against Saint-Etienne and the game against Lyon, they will have built up enough of reserve that they should still be getting the title. Whereas you look then at PSG still have to play Marseille. They still have to play. They still have to go. They have to go to Saint-Etienne. They have to go to Nice. There's more tricky games for PSG. They're at home to Lyon as well. I really do struggle to see how Monaco can chuck this away. The way that they're playing as well, I don't think Jardim's going to let that up.
Well, you've just jinxed them now, Rich. So
PSG fans, come and thank me.
You jinxed it now. Okay. We'll finish with just got time for one final question, which I'll get a brief answer from you all, just as a nice little ode to Lana, because I'm sure she'll like this question. It's from somebody that you'll probably all be familiar with, Muhammad Ali on Twitter.
Right.
He and you can go. Actually, no, you can go first, Lana.
No, I want to go last.
You want to go last? All right, you can go last. Nathan, you can start us. What will Lyon look like next year when all the talent is gone and there's no Champions League League football.
Marseille.
But yeah, yeah, it might do. I think they need to replace the manager at the same time if they do. I don't like Genesio. I said in the summer that they needed someone with a bigger name, a better reputation, and a better plan. You've seen this season that he's gone from a 4-3-3 to a 3-5-2 to a 4-2-3-1 to a, well, I don't know, 0 to 11 or something like that. It's never seemed like he's known what his best team was, what his best formation was, how to play his team, how they should set up, how they should play different teams. It's almost like he's clicking the random button and hoping for the best almost. Or, oh, that worked this week. Let's try it again next week. Oh, it's not worked. Let's change it up then. Oh, that works again this week. Oh, we'll stick with that. Oh, no, it didn't work again. It's cumbersome. It is the best way to put it. Hopefully they don't lose too many. I think I mentioned on our podcast that Depay's signing seems like he's getting in there before anyone else does in the assumption that Lacazette goes and maybe Depay and / Fekir fill that role. If Fekir doesn't go as well, which hopefully he won't do, I hope he returns to the form he had before the injuries because he's an absolutely wonderful footballer when he does. But I think they'll still be okay. They'll probably bring in a couple more players, strengthen it again. But is Champions League out of the? I think that should be their goal next season. I think that might be out of their reach now unless Nice fall off a cliff. But yeah, it's tough to tell. It depends how many go. If it's just Lacazette and Tolisso, maybe they can survive. But if it's more than that, it's going to be a real struggle, I think.
I think that Lyon have been, to sort of quote Arsenal again, I think in the same way that Arsenal did it for a few years, I think Lyon have been overperforming a little bit. I'm not sure they deserve I don't think that, I think achieving Champions League the last couple of years has probably been better than they could have expected. And I still think that they'll muddle through. I think I can see probably the centre-back pairing next year being Mamana and Diakabi, who I think are both going to be excellent. You've got, as you said earlier, we've got Tuzar coming through. I still think, I personally not sold whatsoever on Depay, but I still think they're going to have the nucleus of a decent team. I agree that I think it's quite important that they don't lose Lacazette, Fekir and Tolisso all at once. But I still think they've got a decent squad of players there who I don't think are going to be challenging for the title anytime soon, but there's no reason why they shouldn't be challenging for sort of around the third or fourth place, around that kind of area.
And Rich, wrap us up before I let Lana have the last word on this one.
I think top three is probably out a bit. I mean, even if they do get this 3 points and whatever the outcome of replay game with Metz or whatever, they're still 9 points behind Nice. Yes, I do see Nice dropping off. I'm just not sure I see that a bigger point swing. It will be an interesting summer for Lyon. I do think Lacazette will go. I do think Tolisso will go. I don't think Fekir will go. It's then going to be absolutely crucial that Olas and I agree with what's been said previously, the new manager, because I think there should be the new manager, invest the huge chunk of money they're going to get for Tolisso and Lacazette. That's invested well in bringing in the right kind of players. Whether Depay is that right kind of player, I don't think he is. Doesn't seem to sort of go along with Lyon's signings of late. I do think that the Depay signing was a bit of a rushed panic signing because I've mentioned it on French Football Weekly's podcast that I think it was a reaction to Marseille all of a sudden spending money and Olas not liking that. So I think he's then suddenly gone out and bankrolled a biggish name signing. Depay was the first name out of the hat. But I think they'll have fourth place fine. I don't see them breaking into the top three, and it will be a very, very interesting summer for them.
Yeah, well said. And Lana, finish us off because you wanted to just touch on a bit of love for your man Tolisso, because you want to give him a little bit of love in this question as well, don't you?
Well, yeah, I think also that Lopez might leave. I have a feeling that he will leave. Gonalo will leave. I think that a lot of the first name players might leave this summer. 100% Tolisso will leave. He's number one on Juve's target list. Lacazette will probably leave. I think he might go to Germany as a replacement for Aubameyang. Fekir, I don't see him leaving, mainly because he's performed so poorly this season, and that I think he wants to stay and repay the club while he was out for so long. And, there are some good academy players coming through. I just don't, as you guys said, I don't see them being able to be in top 3 unless they invest wisely. And by wisely, I say don't go spend money on Valbuena signings or Beauvais or even Depay, because I do think it was a panic buy. And I also think he's a replacement for Lacazette, as much as it pains me to say it. But I see a lot of players leaving this summer, sadly enough. I just hope that he shows as much love for the women's teams as he does for the men's, because he obviously wants them to do well, but their main focus should be to get a new coach that shares the values of the club, that has a philosophy, that knows how to go forward, because we saw it yesterday. The setup was shocking. Yes, half the team was out, but that Lyon team, it shouldn't have gone to extra time, because many of those players are capable of, producing the goals. We've seen it in the past as well. And it's so, typical Lyon. They're so bipolar. You can go from beating a big team to losing. And it's just so frustrating. Kris, you know that as an Arsenal fan.
Yes.
So, sorry for rehashing yesterday's results, by the way. But it's just frustrating because, yeah, they have overachieved, but they're also capable of beating, the lesser glorious teams. They should be able to beat the likes of Dijon and not lose by 3 goals just because Lacazette went off injured. So it's just very frustrating, and I think it's going to be a long summer for the club, for the players. I am excited to see how Tolisso does, if he does actually come to Juve, but it looks like he is. I think he'll do really well, and he's so versatile as well, so he could play anywhere. And he has actually played as a goalkeeper in training, and he did stop a Lacazette penalty, so, for future.
He probably faced enough of them.
Yeah, right. I can see the ink drying on the restraining order as we speak, before he moves to Juventus there to keep you at the
He hasn't blocked
gates.
me on Snapchat, so that's good.
Yet. Oh dear. Well, that seems like a perfect place to wrap up the show for tonight. Before we do close off, I'd just like to give our panelists the opportunity just to let you, the listeners, know where you can follow them, and of course just a quick plug for the various shows that they are part of. So Nathan, where can people find you, and where can they listen to you, of course, as well?
Yes, you can find me at Nathan J Staples on Twitter. That's probably the best place to get me. I've got my links up on there as well if you need to find any of my work, mostly on GFFN, and obviously the GFFN podcast every Monday, 8 p.m. live on YouTube, and it goes up on iTunes usually about sometime the next day. So catch me on there. Also on our preview show that's on a Thursday as well. I pundit on that one instead of host. So yeah, you can catch me anywhere there.
Good stuff. Thank you. And Jazz, where can people find you?
So you can find me on Twitter at JeremySmith98, and also French Football Weekly. It's at French FT Weekly, and we're doing at the moment a sort of fortnightly pod, and hopefully the next one will be recorded tomorrow and probably go out on Friday.
Splendid. And Rich, part of the same parish, where can people find you?
Indeed. So same French Football Weekly links. And then my own Twitter is at Rich_Allen85.
Splendid. And last but not least, Lana, where can people find you if they're not already blocked?
Well, it's on Twitter at Lana Davud. I don't write for anyone. I just, come on as a guest. So people will usually just tag me if they want me to rant on their podcast, which they usually do. So
And very welcome you are, of course. And I should say as well to our listeners, if you don't listen to French Football Weekly or GFFM, please do. Even if you're not a particularly huge fan of French football, hopefully tonight will give you a little bit of an insight into what you're missing. And please do tweet the show if you've decided to follow a team that you weren't going to previously. You've listened to this podcast and you thought, I know I'm going to follow one of the teams the lads follow, or indeed Leon, if you really want to suffer along with Lana, or any other teams. So if you want to adopt a team and you want to let us know, please do let us hear who you have adopted and why. And also I have to plug both GFFN and French Football Weekly do brilliant sort of countdowns, if you will, of the best young players in France. Both respective sites do a fantastic job on those. And again, if you're looking at the young talent that we've discussed tonight that's coming out of Ligue1, both those lists are fantastic reads, as are all the articles that get put out as well. So please do give them a look. Right, we will wrap up this special there then, this French flavoured special. You can follow ourselves at the FH Podcast. We're available on YouTube, on Stitcher, on SoundCloud, on iTunes, on our website, all over the place. You can find us, you know the drill. 2 weekly podcasts, one on the European football side, one on the English football side. One podcast for each a week, so twice a week you can hear us, and of course these specials. Keep looking out for future specials. I'm sure we'll have these fabulous guests back again. So my thanks individually first to Nathan. Thank you, Nathan.
Yeah, thank you for having me on.
Pleasure, and thank you, Rich.
Oh, thank you very much. Good fun.
And thank you to Jez for another debut as well.
Thank you.
And thank you, Lana. Always popular. Thank you, Lana. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
No problem at all. So that was the Football Hipsters podcast French football special. Until next time, keep your beers strong and your glasses trendy. I've been your host, Chris, and we will speak to you very soon.